Hey everyone, Kuro the Artist here, and welcome back to another Ben 10 breakdown. We've been through the ringer 1,000 times about the mishandling of Ben's character. Straight shot, he's inconsistent because the network keeps asking for changes, and the writer's room seems to have their own interpretations and disagreements on how to handle said changes, leading us to never having a true grasp on Ben 10's character beyond broad strokes. For me, the biggest issue I have is every time he evolves into a better person, be it his heroing tactics or just his personality, it always gets reset. We never really explore how to take Ben past the hero's journey and what to do with him after he's learned the general core values of saving the day. But this episode of Omniverse touches on that subject, and you know, I feel like this would have been the best version of the character if they continued writing him like this. This episode features Ben as an experienced hero. He's efficient, observant, and makes all the right choices. Now that sounds like it leads to the Superman argument where, oh, if the hero is powerful and perfect, then there's no story, right? I disagree. The way to challenge a well-developed hero is to expand the challenges rather than nerfing the hero, which is usually what Ben 10 unfortunately does. He's far beyond dealing with street-level threats, and everyone, even the villains, know this. His reputation precedes him everywhere he goes, where there's even legends about his power out in space.
There are legends?
Even though Ben has the skills and experience now, he has to balance that out with teaching Rook how to be the same kind of hero he is, and feels like having Rook around forces him to retrace the steps he's already taken.
I'm feeling more like a tour guide than a hero lately. I've saved the universe 1,000,000 times. I just don't want to change how I work.
This way, you do get to sort of subtly repeat some story beats, except it's not through the eyes of Ben, it's through the eyes of Ben teaching Rook. He also has to deal with a threat that endangers other beings, so he can't fully go all out on them without harming them. And adjusting to new aliens is another great way to give him challenges that don't feel forced. I'd argue that while overall, Omniverse seems to have the most inconsistent version of Ben, for reasons we'll get into as the breakdowns continue, and I do have my own personal biases concerning what I like the most out of Ben Tennyson, I think the version of the character in this episode is a great balance of everything people want from Ben Tennyson without sacrificing what makes him Ben Tennyson. He's capable and experienced, but juvenile and flawed, and this is a great way to expand his character arc without ruining what comes from before. So let's dive right into our third OV episode, but if this is your first breakdown and you're curious about how my rating system works, there's a detailed description down below, along with a link to all my previous breakdowns, but by all means watch this one first, I'm sure you'll still enjoy it. Also, we just got back from MomoCon, and if you'd like to see our recap vlog, the link is down below on our second channel, along with a link to the raffle winners who will become new owners of the Ben 10 Omniverse hoodie and a limited edition Horus plushie. And of course, happy Pride Month, y'all. I hope you're having a good one, and if you live in the Central Mass area, please stop by the RJN's third annual Pride event in North Brookfield. More details on the Rural Justice Network social medias, which will also be linked down below. And if you don't live around this area, feel free to donate or at least buy a t-shirt. Now, on to the breakdown. Eugene Sun is perhaps one of the most well-versed writers in the Ben 10 series, being here since Classic, and he comes to bring us A Jolt from the Past, which first premiered September 29th, 2012. As Ben and Rook adjust to life on patrol, the Megawatts have returned, up to their usual shenanigans, or at least so it seems. They later guide the duo to Fistrick's hideout, where they learn of his gang's plan to siphon the power from these beings in order to maintain his illegal weapons dealing operation. So we're starting off with another flashback. OV was really trying to push the idea that it alternates between a classic Ben and present day Ben. At least at the first. It dies off a little bit, but first season or two, you get a ton of flashbacks. Usually the episode starts off with one, or sometimes there's entire episodes dedicated to one. But right here, episode 3, we're starting off with a flashback again. And right here at Mr. Smoothie, this will be our first time seeing young Ben interact with Mr. Smoothie. And you recognize those sound effects? What better way to reference the classic series than one of their first iconic villains of the era, the Megawatts. Now, Omniverse Stinkfly is another one of those hit or miss changes. It's a miss for me, but I see the appeal. Also, I love that sound of his wings. That's pretty much the exact same sounds that the classic series used for his wings. In fact, I think Omniverse used the exact same sound library that the classic series did through a studio called Audio Circus, which is why a lot of the sound effects are the literal sounds from the classic series. Some of them tweaked a little bit, whereas the UAF era didn't have access to those sounds, so whenever Classic Ben showed up or a whole bunch of other classic series things, they'd sound a little bit different. See, like all those sounds, straight out of the old show.
Smoothies. Who'd ever want to drink?
Great joke, because we all know, starting at 15, Ben grows up becoming obsessed with smoothies, especially the weird flavors. But it makes sense that he wouldn't like them as a kid. I mean, there's a ton of different ways taste buds evolve over the years. I used to hate tomatoes. Now I put them in everything. Another shout out to the backgrounds. Y'all ever been to Zingers?
At least this time there's only one of you.
A reference to their first appearance, of course.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now, for all the effort that OV puts into its animation and visuals, seeing the megawatts split in Classic was one of the coolest things about the character. In here, he just flashes and duplicates, which is all clearly the same one, but I mean, it should be able to take a break every now and then. You know, this is fine. When his shoes are unlaced, he trips up on his face, Ben 10.
And of course, I don't have anything that can handle electricity.
Even before feedback, though. Maybe Diamond Head? I don't think his crystals are conductive, at least if he doesn't want them to be. You know, just build a big crystal dome around him or something. I feel like Diamond Head building a dome around people can solve like half of his problems. Gives him another chance to show off feedback too, really trying to hammer in how important feedback is into the series. Although I think this transformation is slightly sped up from the last time. So far it's the same. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, it does seem like they're slightly paced different, this one being the original, of course. But halfway through the transformation, it flips. We go in on the eye, and then in Jolt from the Past, they flip the image, I guess for variety. And now he's facing 2 different ways.
Totally forgot about feedback.
Feedback must still be a new transformation then, if he's still getting used to him. That electricity sound effect is used a lot in Classic too, especially with the megawatts, but I think it was used like pretty frequently. And feedback can absorb multiple targets at a distance and puts all of these guys to sleep.
Nobody makes a fool out of Ben 10.
Now this is something that took me a bit to notice when I was first getting into Omniverse. I noticed that in the flashbacks, the Rust Bucket didn't look like the Classic Series one, and I figured that was just the art style change, but it actually looks just like how the Rust Bucket looked in Alien Force, which is the Rust Bucket 2. I like that they kept consistent with the fact that this is the second Rust Bucket.
Good thing Ben still needs his rubber sheets. Make for good insulation.
Ben's piss saves the day. He's rolling up the sheet with them underneath, so this wouldn't actually roll them into the sheet. This would just roll it up and they'd still be laying on the ground. Forgot to point this out, but this is the grand opening of Mr. Smoothie, so it just arrived in Bellwood. And now you can see that Ben has grown up to love these smoothies. It's a nice little shot. We still see that Max has the Rust Bucket too, and a bunch of the plumber tanks, and here's Rook's little truck here. I love this area right here. It's like, again, there's always so much thought put into these designs. This could have just been a blank wall, and no one would notice.
Sorry I'm late.
Schedule anymore, Ben.
And it actually sounds like they're in a giant empty room.
Come on, Rook, let's go. I'm parked over here.
Is he referring to his car? I know he doesn't drive it past the pilot, but he at least still technically has it for now. They're like, oh yeah, it's off screen over with Fast Track, Ben's dog, and Gwen's brother.
We'll take mine.
They could technically take that if they wanted to, though. Neat little detail here. You see the logo on the truck digitalize away so that they could start transforming the vehicle. Probably makes it easier to draw these parts moving too without having to worry about the logo. This looks like the transforming is very thought out though, probably with the intention of making sure it can be a toy. Although this part is too complicated to transform. It just morphs into this shape, but what are you gonna do? They at least helped sell it with the mirrors and the windshield wipers going in. I think the Proto Truck's pretty cool. I know vehicles aren't like a huge part of Ben 10, but if you think about it, each series did have its own set of vehicles. It's just Omniverse goes hard when it comes to vehicles.
Sometimes you're actually kind of awesome. Sometimes.
Man, just let them have it. Ooh, you know, Omniverse was really good with the CG in the first 2 episodes, but this shot isn't selling it for me. And I'm only pointing it out because of how well they've pulled it off previously. Normally, I wouldn't care. That music shows up a lot too. I think it's like the plumber theme or something. So we got the Omniverse main theme, which, by the way, more parade of comments. I know what a leitmotif is. I'm just saying the name of the leitmotif is called Omniverse theme. So we got the first leitmotif, which is Omniverse theme, and now we got the second one, which is plumber theme. And now it transforms back. And they do have a specific way it transforms back too. If you notice how this flips back up, these go back in pretty much the same way as the last shot. So they are very specific with how it works. It's a nice detail that these things go down too, so that the car can drive over them.
I'm not familiar with human emotional cues.
Another contraction, I'm. I wonder how long he keeps this up for. Also, I don't think I really explained this in the first couple of breakdowns, but the joke is that Rook doesn't ever use contractions, contractions being a combination of 2 words, I am, I'm. But on Ravana, Rook's homeworld, using contractions counts as swearing, even though they aren't literal swears. It's like how you form the sentences. Sort of like Japanese, where like they don't actually have swears. They just change the way that the sentences are structured to imply that it's a more negative and harmful way of speaking. And later on, it becomes a big deal whenever a Ravana-gander uses contractions. But in the first couple of episodes, they either didn't have that idea or weren't used to trying to make sure he never says contractions. But Rook is swearing up a storm right now.
Are you angry at me? Just bored. I'm feeling more like a tour guide than a hero lately.
I think that's pretty valid for Ben. I was giving him a lot of shit the first 2 episodes for feeling like, oh, he doesn't need a partner because he's Ben 10, and you know, we've been through that ego trip with Ben so many times, it's annoying. But here they're taking it from a different angle where Ben doesn't like having a partner because he has to re-explain everything all over again. Not just the way that he operates as a hero, but how Earth works in general. At least in that regard, it's less about Ben having to learn teamwork for the billionth time and more about how he has to retrace a lot of his old steps, just be able to do what he's always been doing.
Careful, it's wet.
Water is wet.
Oh, he's so proud of himself too, but buddy, water's not wet. Y'all remember that debate?
Water's not wet. To say that something is wet means that the water on the surface of that something can be removed. The term wet is an adjective that is only conditional.
I'm sorry that I left you waiting around. I just don't want to change how I work.
Okay, Ben even acknowledges it too. I really like how this is written. You know, this is the dynamic I want them to lean into more, because this is new, unexplored territory. This is how to evolve Ben as a character without retracing his steps. Ironically, by acknowledging you don't want him to retrace his steps.
I hope the real Ben Tennyson lives up to the legends.
Hold on, did he stop moving his mouth?
I hope the real Ben Tennyson lives up to the legends.
Whoops. Can't say I haven't done that though.
They can't all be true, though.
Can't. Tempted to start a Rook uses contractions counter, but I'm always pretty stingy about starting new counters. I don't want to just start one for the hell of it. And also, this is more about trying to get used to writing the character rather than Rook genuinely swearing, because later on when he uses contractions, it's actually a big deal. I'm giving the first couple of episodes a pass because they're still figuring out the show.
Alien X.
Oh boy, here we go.
That's just a rumor that a fan made up and put on the extranet.
That's so funny though, because stuff like that happens all the time. Every year we get a rumor about a new Ben 10 live action movie or a possible new series. So even in universe, Ben's at the point where he's done so much and he's so famous that people are just making shit up right now. But funny enough, Alien X is not one of them.
Show me. Change it to Alien X right now.
And that's exactly what anybody else would do, right?
I'd better not. It's a whole thing.
And he doesn't even bother to get into it though. This is a very realistic conversation I could see happening in the Ben 10 world. This is such a genuine conversation. The writing of the characters is good. It helps reestablish a lot of the things in the Ben 10 universe, and it acknowledges how fans feel about one of the biggest things in Ben 10, Alien X, in a very meta but digestible way. You're killing it, Eugene-san. Keep it up.
Find us a little heroing to do.
There's the Omniverse theme again. I remember these little things from the game creator online. See, Ben's so threatening now, he doesn't even have to fight. Villains just stop. I gotta say, so far, if Omniverse really leaned into this version of Ben, I'd think he was the perfect Ben, hands down. It's just sometimes they really do go back and just make him relive a lot of the same shit over and over again. But here, this is taking everything we know about Ben and evolving it further. All of Omniverse's episodes should have been like this, where if you're gonna backtrack, at least make it not Ben himself who's backtracking. It's him having to teach Rook. That way, I could at least accept him having to relearn a lot of the same lessons over and over again, because he's relearning them through Rook. But here he's just flexing. Ben's done so much. He really has saved the whole universe, and the civilians, the enemies, everybody knows it, so they don't even want to mess with him anymore. This was the same license plate that the first Rust Bucket had. You can even see a reflection of the building in the mirror. I love this music. This right here, this is the same street that they were on in the very last scene right here. In fact, it's the same background but flipped. Look at this tall building right here and how it has this building with the 2 columns on the left. They're on the right and the tall buildings in the background here. Hologram wheel is sideways though. You can see it with the line split down vertically rather than horizontally. Ooh, you know what? This alleyway with the fire escape panning down to the trash can right here, the same alley that Kevin met Arjit in, and the frequently used background in Alien Force promos. Look at the way the shadow stretches along the wall, and the shadows curve around him too as the light comes up. Good stuff. Now this is very, 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 very subtle, but I do love it, so I want to shout it out. When the hologram projects here, you see some lines growing out and connecting it as if it really is being projecting. Normally it's just the circular screen, but here it's like coming out of it a little bit. I really like that. They should lean into that more.
I'm heroing so far.
And there's the old lady on the bench right here. They just keep running around the same block. But yeah, nobody wants to mess around with Ben Tennyson. And you know what? Ben shouldn't be messing around with street level villains anymore. He's way past this. So it's like both sides are bored of the small stuff now. Man's getting so bored with petty crimes.
Look, maybe we should arrest him for jaywalking.
Can the plumbers operate based on Earth laws?
His phone shouldn't be able to be powered here on Earth.
Our first look at Corvo really satisfies the edge in me.
Will you tell her that I'm part of something big?
Corvo here is also voiced by Bumper.
I'll call you back.
The phone that he's speaking into is the same device he turns around that transforms into a weapon, so that's a multi-use tool. Lucky for them though, Corvo just happens to be walking by Ben and Rook. If they weren't on patrol, they'd probably get away with everything. This episode wouldn't have even happened. Shows why going on patrol is important.
Big chill.
Another mistransformation. Like here we get a look at Ben using Heat Blast again, who first started showing back up in UA. Now, admittedly, he looks fantastic in this episode. Incredible. This is probably the best Heat Blast has ever looked. Not a big fan of the big shoulders, but I can excuse that. I say this episode specifically because after a while he starts losing some of his effects. You know how it is with long-running shows. And while I feel like a common defense of that might be the fact that this is Heat Blast at night and during the day they can't do the glow effects, but it's not just the glow effects. It's all of the different colors in him. They use reds and oranges as well. Later on, they just use strictly yellow for his magma, and also the way they draw and animate his fire as well. It changes over time.
Heat blast? Seriously?
Heat Blast, after being voiced by Steve Bloom and D. Bradley Baker, now has his third voice by David Kaye. I don't mind it. I see what they're going for. He's got kind of like a hoarse voice, like he's been smoking a lot. They always try to think about an extra layer they can tie to the voices with the characters rather than just being like, what's a cool voice? And out of the three, I would say this is my second favorite. But man, I'm just so attached to Steve Bloom's voice. And it's crazy because Steve Bloom returns for Omniverse. You know, Dave Kaye, he does a pretty solid job. And we see Heat Blast flying again. He primarily uses the rock now, but it's cool to see that he can still fly. I like that his head's flame turns into a comet. Man, yeah, Heat Blast looks really cool. They're great at animating fire. I'm glad that they got some orange and red in his flames too, and it's not just different shades of yellow, opposed to this lightning, which is pure yellow. So even though it's both like constantly moving plasma-like energies, they look very different from each other when put right next to each other. Transforms faster and faster every time now. Although here, instead of the screen morphing downwards, the front part of it is like a case that slides down, revealing the rest of it. So there are some slight alterations, but I mean, drawing a transformation this complex multiple times in the episode, sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. See some dust kicking up from it hovering close to the ground. Man, he keeps flying perfectly vertically forward before landing. He must have had a ton of momentum, but after all of this, not a scratch. Got him, Rook. That was pretty good teamwork. Heat Blast took out the vehicle, Rook takes out the bad guy.
This doesn't sound like a typical Earth combustion engine.
These are the same static effects that they use for Shock Rock's attack that we've seen before. In fact, these were also reused in Ultimate Alien. My most recent memory of it is when Ultimate Waybig is fighting the Dagon. There's that good classic sounding lightning effect again. He's freeing his buddies. Man, this is such a good shot too. Back here, this looks very UAF though. Note how there's not a lot of outlines and there's not much of that Omniverse textures. Man, these things are so cool to look at. I love the way their lightning looks.
Megawatts?
And it's neat that they play into their slightly shape-shifting abilities too, with the way they look like these black blobs of energy until they reform when they land. Listen to the little zaps as they run. Now they're just messing with them too.
Never faced a Nosedenian.
And that's our first time hearing the term Nosedenian too. One of the few instances where species have slang more popularized than their true species. It mostly happens in Omniverse. They call Nosedenians megawatts, Ithipyrambuloids as Walkatrouts. Then there's the whole sludge puppy thing. See, we've been seeing Rook be excellent at combat so far, but that's usually because he's facing opponents about the same size as him. But here Rook's struggling a bit because they're very small and very fast, not to mention can actually turn into electricity. I like how they actually blink out for a few frames sometimes. Like they're moving so fast and so chaotically, you can't even see them. He got away.
I'll keep after them.
That's one of my favorite things that Rook has, the grappling hook, and I love that he can still use it while it's in his shoulder.
They can't outrun Accelerate.
Now this makes the holograms a lot more easier to see when they don't add that glow filter. I'm not talking about the hologram lines, which I actually do like, but how the first couple episodes they really blurred it out and made it hard to see. Well, it's funny because he asks for Accelerate, selects Humongosaur, and then gets Clockwork.
It's hero time.
There we go, hero time, and a mistransformation. We got a 2-for-1 counter here. And he really runs after him. Again, as we'll later learn, he can just try again. Or at the bare minimum, just transform back and run at them in human form. He's just taking it right now. Maybe he's too afraid to mess with the controls. Also, these slanted roads kind of remind me a little bit of San Francisco. Also interesting that Chrono Sapiens can even get tired, as if they have lungs and stamina and all of that.
Wait.
You can always hear clock sounds like ticking and gears moving with him.
Too far ahead of...
They came back for him, just to mock him, or so it seems. So they're leading him, they're luring him. Even though he couldn't keep up, they waited for him.
It's a miracle they didn't escape a Chronosapien.
It's a miracle that they didn't, so Chronosapiens are notoriously slow, at least before maximizing their time-bending powers, but perhaps Chronosapiens using those type of abilities isn't even that commonplace, because if you think about it, if all Chronosapiens acted as powerful and capable as Clockwork would, or even Maltruant later on, they could become very, very dangerous to the universe. In fact, that's probably what Ben 10K was worried about with the Chronosapiens going rogue when he shows up later on. Even though Chronosapiens can be ultra powerful, they all agree not to, or at least don't care enough to. Which is why even to Rook thinks that it should be very easy to escape and outrun them, as well as Kyber being able to kill one as shown in his trophy room.
I think they wanted me to follow them.
It's a cool looking machine. These designs do feel very classic series, especially with these patterns and the coils and all of that. Oh no, they're all trapped. You can't see any of them in this establishing shot though. But the Megawatts are first introduced as antagonists, but now we're seeing them as the victims. I wonder if they were looking for Ben specifically to come help.
The Megawatts need our help.
Two of the batteries got out!
That sounded like D. They're using their own energy against them. Although this is a really cool device, I'll give them that. Omniverse is really good at designing tech as well. And you can see a little flash of their face as electricity. Poor guys. Ooh, that's a good combo. Ben sweep kicks as Rook sends him flying. Look at the way the kicks are animated too. Really stretches and whips around right at him. Good stuff. A little strange they're not harmed by this though. The man himself.
Better be worth interrupting my workout for.
Sounds like he has his own theme too. Like here we got Fistrick, one of the new recurring lesser villains from Omniverse, voiced by Eric Bauza. Another chance for Eric to flex his range. I'd say out of all of Ben 10's actors, when it comes to versatility, Eric is right there next to D.
You got spies in my house of business?
Looks like Rook is scheming with something.
This kind of alien tech.
I'm sure whoever you took it from isn't too happy about it going missing.
Ben's captured and being threatened right now, and he just doesn't care. Like, this is a very experienced Ben. I'm not even bothered by the fact that he's captured. Like, it's probably another scenario with Heroes United. He could just escape if he wanted to, but he's just letting Fistrick talk so he can hear out his plan.
Use alien hostages to charge it.
It's just good business, bro.
And they're free. Look how close to the ground Ben is, but then he starts falling for a very long time just to be blocks. But this is a great transformation. It happens super quick. I love when they actually make him transform into the aliens. Look how the head builds around him, and you see an actual solid morph. A very powerful smackdown to the ground. Now you see Rook cut through his arm twice, but it doesn't slice the device, it just disrupts it. But Rook's also using some type of energy sword, so perhaps the blade purposefully phases through technology and disables it rather than being a solid blade to cut through things. Ooh, nice catch. This line right here should be colored in black, and they do color it in when he starts pulling them in. Already timed out? That was like barely 20 seconds. Now, I actually really like this armor. It's like a cooler version of Captain Nemesis 10 Buster suit. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like Fistrick in this episode. He's one of those villains that, like, they're great in their first appearance and then slowly degrade into just, oh, it's this guy again. Which is ironic because I praise this episode because it shows how Ben is just so far beyond having to deal with street-level criminals that even the street-level criminals themselves back off of Ben. And then later on, Fistrick becomes that very same level of non-threatening, but they still treat him like he's a big deal. I'll get to the future when I get there, but at least for now, I really like how they're handling Ben, and I really like how they're making this threat an actual unique approach to giving Ben something to combat without it feeling like they're nerfing him or underutilizing his potential. Aside from the Clockwork scene, which, like, maybe Ben just didn't want to mess with the Omnitrix because it's new and he's scared to keep transforming, but I really feel like this is a very well-written Ben. This episode really makes it feel like Ben's been a hero for quite some time. Oh, and you can see all the megawatts in the back too. That's neat. I love how you see some tire treading on his feet. Down by the docks.
A Class 12 armored mecha suit.
How do you beat it?
Upgrade.
You could try Alien X.
Outrunning missiles, as you do. But I like how they're not just missiles either. They got Fistrix's face and flames on them. They really care about so much detail in this show. Like, I'll never get over it.
You might hit the megawatts. We just have to take him down without hurting them.
And that adds an extra challenge too. It's not like, oh, they're not powerful enough to defeat Fistrix of all people. They have to defeat him in a way that doesn't hurt the megawatts, because that's who they're truly trying to save. It creates a problem that can't just be solved by punching him hard enough. These are the stories I'm here for.
I want forearms. Do you hear me?
And now comes one of the best transformations in the show, turning into one of my favorite aliens ever. I love this scene. It seems like it's happening in real time too. You see Rook reacting in the background, continuing to go. But Gravitak gets his core. You see these rocks rippling up his chest, and he slowly becomes bigger. First, his hands turn into rocky texture, and then they actually grow to the size they need to. Ah, it's so good. I like how first they transform his body, then adjust for his size. Yeah, it's like they're seeing this in real time. Maybe the first time you become an alien, it takes a little longer. I don't know.
Who's this?
The GOAT of Omniverse. The absolute peak. Feedback wishes he was him. Gravitak here is voiced by David K. Like Forearms, he has a pretty different voice in his first appearance, and then it evolves to be a lot cleaner as time goes on. I don't really have a preference for his voice, though. I feel like either of them are fine.
I'm still gonna squash you like a bug.
Oh, the sound design is fantastic. And I love the rippling sound effects for his powers too. That like swirling, almost liquidy sound. Now later on his powers do turn green, which I mean, that's fine. But here they're a much more bluer tint. So the way that Gravitak's powers work, at least from my understanding, is it's not just straight up telekinesis. He like increases and decreases the weight of the objects that he designates his abilities to affect. It does really look like telekinesis, but then you see him struggling to get up. And it's like he made the armor super heavy. Oh, that's neat. A shoulder weapon pops out. Look at all of the detail designated just to this weapon, too. It's not just bars and knobs. There's lines and different sized pipes and all that. Aw, Rook.
Come on, partner.
And Ben shows concern. He loves that man. He's got to get the bro in there. You can see the shadow of the crane brush over him right before the impact. You can't keep Rook down.
You're welcome.
This music's good too.
I think I can separate the megawatts from the suit.
Send him into the water.
This is like one of those dump tanks.
I love that too. Ben's still Ben after all. He's got to mess around with his powers. Focus, Rook. You got this. He did it.
Nice shot.
Ben's always complimenting Rook's aim.
Nice going, Rook.
Nice shot.
I even did that in 5YL too. I didn't realize it. It's always cool how on point Rook is. That man does not miss.
12% remaining.
And now the lighting turns off because the suit's broken. That's a good touch. Although between the two lighting choices, the water flickers between being in front and behind these monitors.
Just enough.
Even this one button, like look at all of this detail and stuff just for this button. Could have just been a blank wall with a button, but Ovi's always going hard. Oh yes, this scene. Awesome, I loved this. It's very chaotic at first, but then once he gets a handle on it, he shrinks the radius and streamlines it to being a perfect horizontal line. It's neat that despite how big and blocky he is, they still find ways to make him expressive. Like, he's not limited by his design, but it also doesn't look like they're breaking the design either. He's a very well thought out creature. And he turns into his planet form too. That's just icing on the cake. Got him. Bro. Here we get a handful of the familiar faces we'll be seeing in the Plumber's HQ.
I hear there's a colony of megawatts that helps power Undertown. Since now.
So the megawatts are so thankful they start helping out around the city. I like that. It shows that they don't mind powering things. They probably enjoy it. It's free food for them. But it's the enslavement they got an issue with. So Ben and Rook not only saved them, but now contributed to building Undertown even more. That would have been a neat theme if, like, they slowly kept evolving Undertown through their heroics. See, they're all cheering now. They're so happy. Shaking hands with the plumbers.
And by the way, Alien X is real.
I like how there's no immediate payoff for Alien X either. They start setting him up a bit early. Although I'm pretty sure it's the next episode where we get Alien X, at least in production order. Now, if you couldn't tell already, I think this episode is fantastic. A 5 in a plot, if you will. It's another one of those episodes that has a very simple premise, but it's executed so well, I really don't have any major problems with it. The clockwork scene is the only thing that really gets me, but it's kind of inconsequential too. It's not even like it affected their mission. The megawatts even slow down for clockwork. So I think it's in there just to show that even if Ben failed catching up to the megawatts, it's not about that. They wanted him here. And it also goes to show that Ben's still inexperienced with the new Omnitrix controls. So I guess it's just frustrating seeing him still struggle with the Omnitrix while we're on Series 4, but you know, it is what it is at this point, and it didn't hold anything back. I think Fist Trick was the perfect threat in this episode. He's not quite Vilgax or Darkstar level, but he's a little bit more than the average street criminal, and like I said earlier, he kind of devolves as he goes on. But in this appearance, I think he was a very notable threat. It was unique because it wasn't just about defeating Fist Trick, it was about saving the megawatts, and those are the kind of stories I feel like we need. Ben's already experienced, he's already powerful. Now it's about how does he handle this experience and power, and how does he use those qualities he has to teach Rook to become the same type of hero that he is. We also get some commentary on Alien X. We get another young Ben flashback, which slowly seeds feedback into importance a little more, and the megawatts themselves are returning. It's a great way to show that Omniverse is trying to respect the classic series a little more significantly than UAF did. That's always been their goal, and I have a lot of complicated thoughts about does Omniverse actually feel like the classic series, which I feel like once I find the appropriate time to talk about that, I will, but right now this isn't about that. And it's just very enjoyable. It's a very solid episode of Omniverse. In fact, I think this episode would sell you on the show a lot more than the 2-part pilot did. The pilot definitely explores all of the changes of Omniverse and does a great job setting up the world, but here, if you're trying to get somebody to watch Omniverse without overcomplicating it, I think this is a great way to introduce the show. Characterization, I'm gonna give it a 4. Like I said, this is perfect for Ben. It doesn't feel like he did anything really out of character. In fact, this is the most in character he's felt in the first 3 episodes. It feels like he's on top of his game. He knows what he's doing. Now it's just about solving the problem. Rook, you can tell they're still struggling a little bit with his character, but he's getting there. And while Fist Trick, I think, works in the episode plot-wise, he's kind of just, you know, another dude. He's not really that significant. And the Megabots being treated as sympathetic characters rather than straight-up antagonists was a wonderful way to reintroduce them to the series. Visuals, I'm gonna give it a 5. Omniverse came out the gate on all cylinders, and they're still keeping it up. And it had Gravitack in it, so how could I hate it? I am biased towards Gravitack, but you gotta admit, he's just a very visually entertaining alien. Between his powers, his character design, and the way that he's used to solve problems, you got to see everything he's capable of. All the other aliens too, they looked great. Importance, I'm gonna give it a 4. It sets up a lot about where Omniverse is leaning forward. It sets up Rook's disbelief in Alien X. It shows them working together more. Ben unlocks a new alien. There's a lot of things in this episode that are important, but at the end of the day, if you absolutely needed to skip this episode, you can, and it would be fine. But there's enough here to say that despite it just being another villain of the week story, this one stands out a little bit more with the strings that it pulls. And entertaining, as much as I am loving it right now, I still feel like it only deserves a 4. It just really doesn't reach the highs of a 5, but for what it's worth, it's a great episode. But that still leaves this episode off at a 22 out of 25, a very high score for a very well-deserved episode, and I'm looking forward to continuing with these OV breakdowns. When we take a look at last week's poll, it seems like most people really do like Omniverse's style. This is in the context of it being 10 years later though. I know a lot of people who didn't like it have come around to it, but at least now it seems like most people have warmed up to it, with 12% even considering it their favorite. For this week's poll, I'd like to ask y'all, which are your favorite returning villains of the series in the first couple episodes? I have to cheat a little bit because in order to get more options for this poll, I have to reach into an episode that we haven't covered yet, but so far the major returning villains in Omniverse is Siphon, the Megawatts, the Riedels, and the Incursions. Let me know which one you think Omniverse handled the best in the community tab when this video goes live. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your weekend. And as always, keep it fizzy.